Nintendo and maturity. These two things don't go together very well. At all. Nintendo has always been seen as family friendly. While all the other platforms have hardcore shooters like Call of Duty, the Switch has Splatoon. To my knowledge, not one in-house M-rated Nintendo game has been made. A pretty well-known mature Nintendo game was Conker's Bad Fur Day, which was made by Rare, a second-party developer at the time. And even though it didn't sell very well, many fans say it was a mature classic, and even Mr. E for Everyone knows it was good. And shoot 'em ups like GoldenEye 007 are not at all as mature as Xbox or PlayStation games. Even the very mature games on Nintendo platforms like Devil's Third are a pretty rare sight and are normally not to the degree of the other platforms. Nintendo even censors online services, making it very difficult to chat with other players. Like, what does this even mean? But why does Nintendo do this? They go against the norm and it hurts their sales. Every major Nintendo console after the SNES has done worse than the more mature platforms. Well, except for the Wii. The GameCube, a classic to many fans, had great installments in the E, E10 Plus, and T-rated franchises, and it sold 21.74 million units while on the market. But its competition, the PS2 and the OG Xbox, sold 174 million units combined, absolutely crushing the sales of the GameCube. And those consoles boasted many great installments in mature franchises like Grand Theft Auto and Halo, some even becoming bestsellers. By the 2000s, it was pretty clear that consoles that played mature games were selling better and having an easier time marketing to the increasing number of gamers. But even back in the 90s, this idea was starting to become reinforced. The Sega Genesis was Sega's way of competing with the NES and soon the SNES. With the video game market flooded with colorful, happy games, the Genesis was made to be more dark and mature. The original pack-in game for the Genesis was Altered Beast, a more mature beat-em-up that had the main character forming into a number of creatures. But where the Genesis really hit it big was with Mortal Kombat. Although they didn't make the game, and it was released on both the SNES and the Genesis, Sega's version had a little Easter egg that many flocked to the game for. While the SNES version substituted blood with sweat, all you had to do on the Genesis version was enter that sweet, sweet cheat code to turn on all the blood and gore. This made the Genesis version way more popular, despite its worse graphics, and was one of the first examples that making something more mature was a good thing. Even Sonic, the quick mascot of Sega, had maturity in mind. While all of Nintendo's offerings were just save the princess basic games, Sonic was made to have an attitude, and not care if he showed it, which was different for the times. So, I ask the question again, why does Nintendo strive to be family friendly when the market is getting increasingly more mature? After pondering this for a while, I came up with a few possible solutions, which are listed right here. Nintendo makes trends and doesn't follow them. Nintendo has always been seen as family friendly, so why not stay that way? Nintendo's franchises don't blend with the mature genre, and Nintendo is the only one catering for families and has no other competition. Let's start with the first one. Nintendo makes trends and doesn't follow them. Nintendo has always been on their own path, paving new roads for the company. Whether it's jumping into the toy/video game market or pioneering the motion control concept, Nintendo really likes to set trends. Although this could be the reason for Nintendo keeping family friendly, it's probably not. Many of Nintendo's innovations have nothing to do with the type of games they make, and many of the things Nintendo was credited for starting had already been done by other companies. So, setting trends is not one of the reasons for Nintendo's family-friendly nature. Now we go on to number 2, which is Nintendo started as a family-friendly company, so why not stay that way? Nintendo started out pretty family-friendly, as they made toys as early as the 60s before diving into the gaming world, and this worked for them. Some of their earliest successes came from making toys and video games. So why mess with this? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Actually, yes. Many of the mainstay franchises Nintendo produces started out as family-friendly and still are today. Now, you could say that the mature third-party developers like Rockstar stayed away from Nintendo's hardware as it was less powerful than the competition, but I don't see this to be true. Even when Nintendo had more powerful hardware, they still tried their hardest to stay family-friendly. On a related note, in the hearing that covered the increasing mature themes in video games and media, Nintendo repeatedly threw Sega under the bus, saying that what Sega was doing would not fly on Nintendo console. This was just plain rude, but what is really funny to me is that one of the main games talked about came back in a re-release and was on a Nintendo console then. So staying consistent is one of the reasons for Nintendo staying family friendly, but that can't be the only one. So on to number 3, which happens to be Nintendo's franchises just don't blend with the mature genre. I mean, could we ever see Mario with a gun, The Legend of Zelda with blood and gore, or an actually scary Luigi's Mansion? Well, actually, some of the things that I mentioned weren't too far off. In the early stages of development for the original Super Mario Bros., Shigeru Miyamoto, a very well-known developer at Nintendo, considered giving Mario a gun, but the project went a different way. And while The Legend of Zelda doesn't have blood and gore, it does cover some very mature themes, and some fans have even speculated that Majora's Mask is Link in Purgatory or the waiting room before the afterlife. But most of the time, these games are pretty family friendly. So on to number 4, which I think is one of the most definitive reasons. Think about Xbox and PlayStation for a second. GTA, Halo, Uncharted, Gears of War, all mature games that are exclusive to these consoles. Xbox and PlayStation cater to a more mature audience, leaving little to no room for another market. Then in comes Nintendo, filling the family-friendly shoes the other companies fail to fill. Nintendo has no competition, making it very easy for them to produce high-quality games without the pressure of other companies weighing them down. So Nintendo just stays family-friendly, making their lives easier. They also get old fans, making it even more profitable to cater for families because of the added benefit. Whether Nintendo stays family-friendly for all of these reasons or for none of them, I just hope Nintendo stays this way. This is one of the reasons I grew to love them, and I'd hate to see them change. Well, except maybe if they left the console market. Nintendo has been around for some time. Starting as a card company in 1889, Nintendo has come a long way. They've revolutionized the video game market time after time with their amazing consoles. But with the pretty recent failure of the Wii U, fans have been wondering if Nintendo should just drop out of the console race. Admittedly, it would be pretty cool to play Mario Kart on the PlayStation or The Legend of Zelda on the Xbox. So, should Nintendo leave the console market, or should they keep fighting with the other companies? Although I don't inherently want them to leave the console market, I think it could boost the company's overall sales and credibility. Some of you may know Super Mario Odyssey, a 3D platformer for the Nintendo Switch. It has sold over 14 million copies worldwide as of May 2019 and was a great success, garnering many 9.5 out of 10s and 10 out of 10s. Since this is a AAA title, a game with a big, recognizable production team, it costs anywhere between $50 and $60 million to make and produce. Super Mario Odyssey costs $60, but only 27 of those dollars goes back to the Big N. The rest goes to stores, distribution costs, etc., etc. After multiplying the 27 times 14 million, you get $378 million. Quite a lot of money, right? This is why I believe Nintendo should drop out of the console market. Having these multi-million dollar games on two platforms would give them more range and could possibly double their already high profit. And with a broader audience, the number of people playing their games would grow and not just be chained to one console. Now you might be saying,
"Souls cost more, which means they will get more money back, you dummy."
and while you're partially right, you aren't seeing the whole picture. While consoles in theory would get more money back, this is all very dependent on a number of things. One example is production costs, which in some consoles can be quite a lot. Keeping with the recent trend, the Nintendo Switch retails for $300 and has sold 32 million units so far. The estimated cost to make a single unit is around $257. And I'm going to assume that all $43 goes back to Nintendo since there was no reliable source to find the breakdown of the money. So after running the numbers, the estimated earnings of the Nintendo Switch as of now is $1,367,000,000. Now that seems like a lot, but hear me out. Most of the money goes to salaries, company costs, and losses. If Nintendo were to drop out of the console race, they could have multiple departments working on multiple games instead of only one or two departments. And they could also lay off just a few employees here and there, further increasing the profit. Also, since Nintendo has already established that they make stellar games in a reasonable amount of time, the sales could really take off. But as with all things, there are bound to be some downsides. Nintendo would suddenly be competing with many developers, making it way harder to get their games out there, and their credibility might be a little bit tarnished because of their circumstances. But Nintendo really isn't about pride or even credibility to some degree. They're all about innovating their company for the better. And to address the obvious, yes, Nintendo sales would drop, but I think the overall average sales would be greater than before. So much could be done with the possibility, but I know that this would never happen. Nintendo could lose so much by dropping out of the console market, and even though there is a possibility of growth, it would be so dumb to do this. So Nintendo will just stay both a console manufacturer and a game developer, the family-friendly company we all know, and that's just fine. But if I ever were the president of Nintendo and I was given this proposition, I might just go for broke and see how it works. Thank you so much for watching this video. I put a lot into this and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it entertaining and took at least a little bit something from it. I have to thank all the YouTubers I watch since they all inspired my voice in the way that I made this. Also, many of the facts came from these fine people. The YouTubers include ScottTheWoz, RelaxAlax, Nathaniel Bandy, Did You Know Gaming, TetraBit Gaming, Beta64, Mr. A Game, and everyone else. See you all next time.